Hello everybody and welcome to Card of the Week, the show where I roll a random card and then I talk about that card for however it fancies me, whatever I get inspired by, and I just get a yap for 10 to 15 minutes. I am here on my third favorite website, Arkham Build, and we're going to roll today's card and see what we are dealing with. By the way, thank you for your support in the first episode. I'd appreciate a like, comment, subscribe if you aren't. Alright, let's see what we got. Hired Muscle. So we're looking at another rogue card here. So Hired Muscle is a 1 cost, 1 experience, asset, ally. Soaks for 3 and 1, ally criminal. You get +1 fist, forced. At the end of the upkeep phase, you must either pay 1 resource or discard Hired Muscle. Now, I would not be at all surprised if you were like, what's this card? And it's kind of funny because this card came out in the Dunwich Legacy, which was like the first expansion. Like it was like the first big major expansion for the game. Right now we're waiting for like, you know, like Children of Blood after the core set, but that's kind of like the way we had. It wasn't as long. Actually, it was about as long, like roughly the same to go from Core 2026 to Children of Blood to the new Dunwich, and then also like the first full, the first Mythos pack. And I'm pretty sure this is from the first Mythos pack because it's card number 27, which I think is, I feel like that's in the, that would have been Miskatonic Museum, but I could be wrong with that. So Hired Muscle is a very forgettable card. And I think that the reason for that is that ultimately Hired Muscle doesn't actually have a home, right? Because most of the time, when you want a fist boost, you're going to find it in more consistent places. Allies that have an effect that is beyond just the fist boost, right? So like a good example of this is Dunwich Legacy. When this came out, we had Beat Cop and Beat Cop 2, right? And those were the allies that you just kept in play. And especially with Beat Cop 2, that incidental 1 damage was very important for finishing things off. Now, I mean, you had the machete at the time, which was also really good at like dealing damage, but Beat Cop 2 gave you that fist and the little ping damage, which was really good, which was also good at killing whippoorwills, which were a very notoriously tough enemy to deal with at the time, and arguably still a notoriously tough enemy to deal with today if you're not teching for it. Let's talk about the investigators that were able to play Hired Muscle. So, like in the last one I talked about Pickpocketing 2, we had Skids O'Toole, who could use Beat Cop 2, and realistically, I mean, we'll get back to Skids O'Toole. We had Jenny Barnes, who actually had the resources to pay for this guy, so I'm pretty sure there were decks around the time that this came out that would maybe be a Jenny deck that would play Hired Muscle, but it, and along with its counterpart Treasure Hunter, which gives +1 book, which might be on a card of the week in the future, was not really like a thing. Like, I don't really remember it happening, and odds are if it was good, it would have happened, especially with a smaller card pool, right? Because you weren't really exploring out of desperation, you were kind of just exploring out of necessity, and if Hired Muscle was still not relevant at that time, is he ever really relevant? We also had Safina Rousseau, and going up to 3 fist is not really that exciting. Going to the off-class stuff, we have Wendy Adams, who only has 1 combat, so like that's not the way, right? She only has 1 fist, so she ain't frickin' with this guy. And then we also had Lola Hayes could play this as part of the 03 that she could run. Again, not really great. Like, you do get the +1 fist static with Lola Hayes, but you have the forced at the end of the upkeep phase. You must either pay 1 resource or discard Hired Muscle. Before we look into the future after Hired Muscle is released, let's look at Skids O'Toole again. Why isn't Skids O'Toole playing this card? We always say that one of Skids O'Toole's major problems, especially back in the day, was that he only had 3 fists, right? There was a weapon at the time, Switchblade, that also came out in Dunwich Legacy, the upgraded version, which was, if you succeed by 2 or more, you get to deal extra damage. The upgraded version gives you +2, so it's a little bit more consistent. In theory, Skids O'Toole would have loved that card. He'd love Hired Muscle, right? Only 1 resource up front to get +1 fist, but then you have to pay a resource at the end of each turn. Skids O'Toole, in theory, wants to use these resources to instead, activate his ability to get more actions. So Hired Muscle would eat into that effect. So it's like one of those things where, yeah, he only costs 1 up front and he does soak for 3 damage and 1 horror, which are actually very big numbers for the numbers that he permits. But that was eating into number 1, Skids O'Toole's ability to pay this guy off. But again, beat Cop 2. That was kind of like the thing that existed here if you were looking for +1 fist, right? Which Skids was looking for. +1 fist, Beat Cop has it. Beat Cop costs 4 in 4 rounds. Well, three upkeep phases with Hired Muscle. This guy costs as much as a Beat Cop, and he doesn't give that ping damage. These are very relevant factors to determine whether if a card is like playable or not playable. And there's also, of course, the elephant in the room that in the original, when like the collection was very small, a lot of rogue investigators were just playing Leo DeLuca. 33% more action was very good, right? Like just having like an extra action each round was a lot better than what Hired Muscle offered. Now, worry not, Hired Muscle, because you did eventually find a home. In the Forgotten Age, Leo Anderson came out. And Leo Anderson, while he wasn't really able to use Hired Muscle to great effect, and I would argue to this day Hired Muscle is not exactly a great card. What Leo Anderson was able to do was able to play these in allies without paying their costs, because he can do one each turn. And does he get a cost reduction, or am I just making that up? But he's able to do that as part of his ability, and then it makes it so that the downside of Hired Muscle feels a little bit less relevant. Leo Anderson also has 4 fists, so being able to go up to 5 with Hired Muscle is really good. Leo Anderson was naturally drawn to charisma, as well as his Mitch Brown, his signature asset. It kind of gave it that these non-unique allies taking up less spots, or alternatively rotating through the spots that he had, became a much easier pill to swallow. However, there weren't really many payoffs to this kind of like meat grinder archetype when it just came out. In theory, they were there, right? In theory, these cards would work together, but they never really had a good payoff. There was a theory that the payoff of Decorated Skull would kind of get there, and believe me, I tried it. I like cards with skulls on them. That's why I like Jim Culver. I just like skulls, I guess. They just make me feel good. But Leo Anderson still never really wanted Hired Muscle for those kind of effects. Ultimately, it was just too slow, which is a crazy thing to say for a 1 cost, 1 experience, 3 meat soak ally. But he was just too slow. And you might be thinking, but he's so free up front. What is making him slow? It's that tax at the end of each turn. That money has to come from somewhere. And yes, this is at the end of the upkeep phase, so you do gain your resources before you have to pay it. So in theory, this guy never goes away. As long as you are gaining money during the upkeep phase, this guy is going to stick around for as long as you want to pay him, right? Because it's upkeep, draw card, gain resource, untap, and the upkeep, you have that resource to pay. But this was stopping you from paying for other cards. It would mean that your game plan would actually ultimately just slow down because you weren't paying for better assets, your weapon assets perchance, or like if you were trying to replicate, like change out your guns, or if you're trying to play events and kind of do those kind of things, or, you know, like God forbid you were like Jenny Barnes trying to pay for a Streetwise, right? Like Jenny Barnes got that extra resource, but she never really actually was able to, like, she basically has to give up her ability to pay for Hired Muscle, which is not really an appealing thing, even just to be at 4 fist, right? Jenny Barnes would rather, again, just take Leo DeLuca. I guess she'd love to take Leo Anderson too, but would love to take Leo DeLuca and just like have more action and be able to pass more tests in theory, right? So it's one of those things where this is where Hired Muscle is really slow. And I'm going to say it, and then I'm going to kind of just turn this on its head, but a big reason for this was the lack of good economy, right? Resource production at this stage of the game was really only on higher experience cards. Hot Streak, right? We had Emergency Cash at level 0 for the Rogue class, and then the other best resource producing card was Dr. Milan Christopher, who, as we know, is very good, but doesn't exactly synergize with Hired Muscle. And was there an investigator besides Lola Hayes that could play both of them? If there is, they're slipping my mind right now. There might be, but I don't think there was at the time of this card's release. I guess no. I guess Jenny Barnes could do it again. She could take Milan Christopher in her Dunwich Splash. However, it turns out when you're able to kind of just produce resources for free, hired muscle still ultimately isn't worth it. And this is where the kind of deep Arkham analysis can really sing. When you can kind of look at hired muscle and be like, if I can pay for this guy every turn and not fall behind, I'm still not falling behind on my on like my resources, on my production, why am I not playing hired muscle? And the answer to that is very simple. This guy doesn't actually do anything. He gives you +1 fist. Ultimately, though, that is not worth an ally slot. It might sound like it is, because a lot of the time I'll play Beat Cop level 0 to just like get the +1 fist in scenario 1, but that's scenario 1. I'm not investing more of like my XP into that slot. It's just the one ally slot, Beat Cop's holding that space to let me kill enemies more efficiently. I have to spend experience to ultimately do less with my ally slot than if I just kept the level 0 Beat Cop in, just following this example, right? Ally slots are very powerful. We are looking to fill those with very powerful things, and ultimately, hired muscle is not that powerful, because just +1 fist for an endless resource cost is not worth it, even if the upfront cost is so sweet. And while he is playable in the Meat Grinder Leo decks, realistically, the Meat Grinder Leo decks are actually on the lower tier side, like the lower power scale side for Leo Anderson decks. So ultimately, hired muscle is left without a home, wanting, waiting, hoping someone will buy him, but unfortunately, people ain't buying. All right, that was this week's Card of the Week. Thank you so much for watching. If you want gameplay analysis discussion for Arkham and other games, make sure you're subscribing if you're not. I'd love a comment. Think of what you think of Hired Muscle and also this series. And let's hope we roll something from the other classes next week. Not because I'm not happy to talk about the rogue classes, but just because, you know, I'd like to talk maybe about Mystics or something. That'd be fun. Or Survivors. You know, there's other classes. Guardians? PU. Don't want to talk about them. They stink. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a good one. Thank you to all of our patrons. Thank you to everyone watching. You guys rock. See you for the next one. And as always, the GGs.